Hey students, welcome to week 4. Dr. Lindsay here. I just wanted to run through a couple things. This should be kind of quick, but I do have a video at the end that I wanted to share. So in your case studies this week, I started talking about this last week, but there's a second part that I skipped over until now. So this part of the case study is not exactly like the rest you've seen, where you have a patient, you're trying to learn about the patient. The first part of this is really just information. So a lot of this is going to be helpful in answering the questions, but not specific to an individual. There is a very short part at the end about, what's his name? Jason, who is dealing with some issues and his 7-year-old. So read through that. I think it's fairly straightforward, but I did want to pull up the document just for 2 points. For what is reverse transcriptase, that can be a really tough question, and I wanted to give you a head start on that. So I want you to know that a retrovirus is encoded by RNA and not DNA. Now that's not the full answer to that question, so don't just put that, but I think it'll help to get you on the right foot to answer it. So if you have questions about that, let me know. Otherwise, that's a good head start. The rest of these are fairly straightforward, asking for definitions or differences between two things. And in the case of pharyngitis, I wanted to point out one thing. This is not really specific to the question, but more so just things you hear in your everyday life. When people are sick, especially when they have something like pharyngitis, they might kind of feel along their neck and say, oh, I have swollen glands. And that's not at all true. What you have there are lymph nodes, and I made that bold right here. And I wanted to make sure that you know lymph nodes are not glands. So whenever you hear that phrase, swollen glands, that is not what you're feeling if you have a case of the flu or you have a cold or something like pharyngitis. If you feel those lumps along your neck or under the bottom of your jaw, you're feeling lymph nodes. You're not feeling anything that's glandular. So that might be a nice head start in that direction too, but many of you who have already looked into lymph nodes and started your studying in the lymph system, you already know that. Okay. So now I wanted to switch gears a little bit to the discussion this week. We're talking about vaccines, and that can be such a hot button topic, and I actually really enjoy reading the discussions this week. For those of you who I've replied to or maybe will reply to, please don't take anything I say personally. I am very adamant about being the devil's advocate here. So whatever you say, I'm going to try and push you a little bit on that, just to find out why you think that way or what evidence you can find to back up your opinions. So I'm just playing devil's advocate. Don't think I'm attacking you personally for your opinions or your thoughts. But most of you are saying vaccines are a good thing, and I couldn't agree more. Vaccines are great. Vaccines have done wonderful things for our country, for the world. But at the same time, I think we miss out on a couple things, and that often goes back to policy making and legislation and really who's involved in making those decisions for us when it comes to mandates and what's recommended by the CDC. So I wanted to share 2 things out of a video called The Greater Good. It has its own website, so you can check this out. You can find it on, I think, Netflix and a couple other streaming services, and you can also find some bootleg copies on YouTube and things like that. Really interesting take. It is a documentary. It takes about an hour and a half, I think, to get fully through it, but there's cool, sometimes less talked about facts in here that maybe open your eyes a little bit more to the whole debate in general. So again, I'm not saying vaccines are bad. I would never say that. Science has proved over and over that they are great, but I want to push your thinking on that. And here's the first thought from the movie that I wanted to point out. In the movie, they point out a really interesting thought here about how many doses of vaccines are recommended for children this year as opposed to when a lot of us were younger, think in the 80s, maybe 70s or before. The earliest schedule that the CDC provides, and this is directly from their website, you can pull this up on their website, this is from 1983, and if you look through this, you have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, only 4 different vaccines, and I had the numbers on the last slide. So 4 vaccines and 11 doses. So 11 doses of 4 vaccines. Think about how much that would impact your immune system and your whole body's health compared to this year. And the most recent posted is 2015. Again, directly from the CDC website. Check out all of these vaccines that are listed here and how many doses are suggested for each one. And this page is just through 18 months. We actually have to scroll to a second page to see the rest of the doses through age 16. So if that changes your mind at all or it makes you think a little bit more, it should. In some ways this is just proving that we've come a long way. We have a lot more vaccines. We have pushed science to the limit where we have developed more vaccines for more things. That's great. But at the same time, is this too much? Is this something that is going to come back and bite us in the long run? Do we have the long-term evidence to support this type of schedule? I'm going to leave that question up to you to answer, but I want to include this video, this portion of video from the greater good. Make this full screen. And I know that this might actually be kind of bad audio for you, but if you can't hear this part very well, I encourage you to go check it out and watch the whole documentary for yourself. So here's just a couple minutes to explain why you might want to think more about those recommended vaccines.
I think Gardasil should be taken off the market. It hasn't been well tested before it was placed in the general public.
The FDA has a particular process that's called fast tracking when there is a promising drug that comes forward. Gardasil, they had scheduled a 4-year trial, but after 15 months, they went to the FDA and said, there is nothing like this vaccine on the market. Would you please consider this for fast track? And the FDA said yes. So within 6 months, they approved it. And as soon as they had it approved, Merck said, we will no longer continue our trial. We're going to stop our trial because our drug is now approved. So therefore, we don't know the long-term side effects. We do know there have been reports of pancreatitis, reports of autoimmune disease, reports of transverse myelitis, and reports of juvenile ALS, which is uniformly fatal in adolescents.
All right, I'll stop it right there, but I just wanted to point out what fast tracking was. And I think that's a good visual that shows how the government can really influence what is pushed onto the American public. So think about that. It's not just for vaccines, by the way. Fast tracking happens for all kinds of pharmaceuticals. Look into it a little bit more, especially if you are using a newer drug or someone recommends that you use a newer drug. How long has it been tested? What has it been tested for? And just think critically. Again, I'm not saying that anything is bad here. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but I do want to push your thinking on the topic. So that's all I have for you this week. For those of you who are still struggling with APA, please make sure you check out how to do it. Citations are going to be important for both your case studies and discussions. I will see you next week. Thanks.